Thomas Whitmore, a 72-year-old Indiana farmer, sits alone on his weathered porch with a letter he's carried for 30 years but never had the courage to send. It's an apology to his son David, who walked away 20 years ago and never looked back. The farmhouse behind him stands silent, the fields stretch empty, and 5 generations of family legacy are dying with him. But when Thomas's late wife Margaret orchestrates one final plan from beyond the grave, David is forced to return home. Her will demands they spend 30 days working the land together, side by side, or lose everything their family built. Now a father who destroyed his most important relationship and a son, still carrying decades of hurt, must decide if broken bonds can ever truly be mended. Can 30 days of forced reconciliation heal 20 years of silence? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The sun rises over 300 acres of Indiana farmland, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The light catches on morning dew, making the unharvested corn shimmer like an ocean of gold. This is land that's been in the Whitmore family since 1847, when Thomas's great-great-grandfather first broke ground with a team of oxen and a prayer. Thomas stands at his bedroom window, same spot where he's watched the sunrise for 50 years. His frame is still solid despite his age, shoulders broad from a lifetime of manual labor. Deep lines crease his face like furrows in a field, each one telling its own story of seasons weathered and hardships endured. His hair, what's left of it, is the color of winter clouds. The house around him carries the weight of history in every board and beam. The oak floors, worn smooth by generations of footsteps, creak familiar songs when walked upon. The wallpaper, faded flowers that Margaret picked out in 1976, still clings to the walls in most rooms, though it's begun peeling at the corners. Margaret, gone now 3 months, and the house still smells of her lavender sachets. Thomas finds himself talking to her sometimes, forgetting she's no longer in the next room. The silence answers back, and he remembers all over again. He descends the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. The kitchen waits below, unchanged since the 1980s. Avocado green appliances, linoleum floors with a pattern of sunflowers, a formica table with chrome legs where 3 generations have eaten breakfast. The coffee maker gurgles to life, its familiar sound a small comfort. Through the kitchen window, Thomas watches the fields. They should have been harvested 2 weeks ago, but he couldn't bring himself to hire the crew. The corn will wait a few more days. Everything will have to wait until after tomorrow, after David comes home. The thought of his son's name still brings a familiar ache to Thomas's chest. 20 years since David left, angry and hurt and swearing he'd never return. 15 years since they last spoke on the phone, a brief, stilted conversation that ended in silence. And now Margaret's will brings him back. The coffee tastes bitter this morning. He sits at the kitchen table, in the same chair he's occupied for 5 decades, and pulls out the yellowed envelope from his shirt pocket. He's carried it every day for 30 years, tucked close to his heart like a talisman or a curse. The paper has gone soft with handling. He doesn't need to open it to know what it says. He wrote the words, agonized over them for weeks before sealing the envelope. An apology, an explanation, a father's admission that he was wrong, that his pride and stubbornness had destroyed the most important relationship in his life. But he never sent it, never found the courage to drop it in the mailbox. The sound of tires on gravel pulls Thomas from his reverie. He looks out to see Walter Morrison's pickup truck pulling into the drive. Walter, 75, has been Thomas's best friend since they were boys running through these same fields. Now they're old men, watching their dreams shrink to the size of their aches and regrets. Walter enters without knocking, as he has for decades. He's shorter than Thomas, his body bent slightly from a lifetime of farm work. His face is weathered leather, his eyes still sharp behind thick glasses. "Morning, Tom," Walter says, pouring himself a coffee. "You sleep any?" "Some," Thomas lies. The truth is, he's barely slept since Margaret died, the bed too big and empty without her. Walter settles into the chair across from Thomas, the one that was Margaret's for 50 years. Thomas has to look away. David called last night, Walter says carefully. Called me, I mean. Wanted to know what kind of state you're in. Thomas's jaw tightens. What did you tell him? Told him the truth, that you're hurting, that you miss Margaret something fierce, that you're the same stubborn fool you've always been. Walter's voice carries affection, despite the harsh words. He asked if you'd talked about him at all. What's there to say? Tom, Walter leans forward. He's coming home tomorrow. That's something. Margaret would have been happy. Margaret spent 20 years trying to fix what I broke, Thomas says, his voice rough. And I never helped her. Never told her the whole truth about why he left. Walter is quiet, letting the confession hang in the air. You planning to tell him? When he gets here? I don't know what I'm planning. After Walter leaves, Thomas spends the morning preparing the house. He changes the sheets in David's old room, the one that's been closed off for 20 years. The walls still bear posters from David's teenage years. Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, a map of Europe that David dreamed of traveling. The desk still holds books David read in high school, their spines cracked and pages dog-eared. A baseball glove sits on the shelf, leather dry and cracked. A trophy from the regional championships in '83, when David pitched a perfect game and Thomas missed it because of a broken tractor that couldn't have waited. That was the beginning of the end, though Thomas didn't realize it at the time. The missed games, the broken promises, the farm always taking precedence over family. The breaking point came on a June evening in 2005. David was 25, fresh from college, with a degree in environmental science and ideas about sustainable farming that Thomas dismissed as city boy nonsense. They'd argued before, but this argument was different. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Truths revealed that changed everything. Thomas closes David's door and returns downstairs. In the living room, he opens the old roll-top desk where Margaret kept her correspondence. Her handwriting fills dozens of notebooks, journals where she poured out her thoughts and prayers. Thomas has avoided reading them since she died, afraid of what he'll find. The most recent journal sits on top. He opens it to a random page, dated just 2 weeks before she died. Thomas still carries that letter in his pocket, Margaret wrote. I've never asked him what it says, but I know it's for David. He thinks I don't notice the way he touches it sometimes, like he's checking to make sure it's still there. I wish I could tell him that saying sorry isn't weakness, that pride is just another word for fear. But he has to learn that himself. I pray he learns it before it's too late. Thomas's hands shake as he closes the journal. Margaret always saw through him, saw the fear behind his stubbornness, the hurt behind his pride. She never gave up on either of them, never stopped believing that someday they'd find their way back to each other. The afternoon passes slowly. Thomas walks the perimeter of the farm, checking fences and equipment. The land looks different now, neglected in ways that would have horrified his father. Fences need mending, outbuildings need paint, machinery sits rusting in the barn. The farm that sustained 5 generations is dying with him, and there's no one to pass it to unless David comes back. Unless this homecoming is about more than Margaret's will. Unless Thomas can find the words he should have spoken 20 years ago. The sun sets in a blaze of orange and purple, painting the fields in colors that take Thomas's breath away. He's seen this sight thousands of times, but tonight it feels different. Tonight it feels like a beginning and an ending all at once. He returns to the house as darkness falls, turns on the porch light and sits in the swing that he and Margaret bought 40 years ago. The chains creak their familiar song. The night air is cool, carrying the scent of dry corn and distant rain. Thomas pulls out the envelope one more time, turns it over in his hands. The address is written in his careful hand, David Whitmore, followed by a college address that's long since outdated. The stamp is old, the wrong denomination now. The whole thing is a relic of a moment when Thomas almost found the courage to make things right. Tomorrow David comes home. Tomorrow Thomas will have to decide whether to keep carrying this letter or to finally let it fulfill its purpose. Tomorrow The silence that's lasted 20 years will finally break. He sits in the swing until the night grows cold. He sits and remembers and regrets and hopes. The fields whisper in the darkness. The house behind him stands solid, waiting to see if it will shelter a reconciliation or witness another heartbreak. Thomas Whitmore is 72 years old, and he's about to face the hardest conversation of his life. He's about to confront the truth he's hidden for 20 years. He's about to learn whether redemption is possible for old men who've spent decades building walls instead of bridges. The night deepens. The stars come out, and Thomas sits in the swing, waiting for dawn and for his son, carrying his apology like a stone in his pocket. The sound of a car engine cuts through the afternoon stillness. Thomas stands on the porch, his heart hammering in his chest. Through the trees lining the long driveway, he catches glimpses of a blue sedan, the color appearing and disappearing between branches like a memory struggling to surface. He's been standing here for an hour, unable to settle, unable to do anything but wait. Walter sits in the swing, solid and silent, a witness to whatever comes next. The car emerges fully from the tree line, and Thomas gets his first clear look at his son in 20 years. David parks near the barn, the same spot he always did when he lived here. For a moment he doesn't get out. Thomas can see him through the windshield, hands still on the steering wheel, staring at the house. When David finally emerges, Thomas feels the breath catch in his throat. His son is 50 now, though Thomas still sees the boy he was. Time has carved its mark. David's hair, once dark like Thomas's, is streaked with grey. Lines frame his eyes. He's thinner than Thomas remembers, wearing clothes that speak of a different life. Khakis, a button-down shirt, loafers instead of boots. David sees him on the porch and stops. They stare at each other across 30 yards of gravel driveway, across 20 years of silence, across a chasm that seems impossible to bridge. Neither moves, neither speaks. Walter clears his throat, and the spell breaks. David reaches into the car and pulls out a small overnight bag. He walks toward the porch with measured steps, his face carefully neutral. "Hello, Dad," David says when he reaches the porch steps. His voice is deeper than Thomas remembers, controlled and careful. "David," Thomas's own voice comes out rough. "Good drive?" "Long." David sets his bag down. His eyes move over the house, the fields, taking inventory of changes and neglect. Place looks different. 20 years will do that. Thomas immediately regrets the words, the implied accusation in them. He tries again. "You look well. City life suits you. Does it?" David's jaw tightens. "I wouldn't know. Never had much choice in the matter." Walter stands, sensing the tension about to ignite. "I'll put coffee on," he says, disappearing into the house and leaving them alone. David climbs the porch steps slowly. He's close enough now that Thomas can see the details. The wedding ring on his left hand, the watch that looks expensive, the small scar over his left eyebrow from a childhood accident involving the barn roof. "Mom's lawyer said the reading is tomorrow morning," David says, all business. "I'll stay tonight, handle whatever needs handling, and head back Sunday." "You came all this way just for that?" "I came because Mom asked me to in her letter." David's eyes meet his father's, and there's something hard in them, something hurt. "She wrote to me every month for 20 years, Dad. Every single month." "Did you know that?" Thomas did know. He'd seen Margaret writing those letters, sealing them with hope and prayer. He'd never asked what she wrote, never wanted to face his own failure reflected in her words. "She never stopped loving you," Thomas says quietly. "No, she didn't." David's voice cracks slightly. "She never gave up even when I stopped writing back. Even when I couldn't bear to read her letters because they reminded me of everything I lost. She kept trying, right up to the end. She was stronger than both of us. She had to be, didn't she? Someone had to be strong enough to keep caring." The words hang between them, an accusation and a truth. Thomas feels the envelope in his pocket, suddenly aware of its weight. His hand moves toward it unconsciously, and David's eyes follow the movement. "What's that?" David asks. Thomas's hand freezes. "Nothing." Old habit, but David's seen the gesture before. His eyes narrow. You're still carrying something you can't let go of. We all carry things, Thomas says defensively. Yeah, we do. David picks up his bag. Which room? Your old one. I cleaned it up for you. Something flickers across David's face. You kept it? Your mother wouldn't let me change it. Dinner is a quiet affair, tension thick as fog. Walter stayed, insisting someone needed to keep the peace and the conversation moving. He sits at the head of the table, while Thomas and David flank him like opponents at a negotiation. Thomas made pot roast, Margaret's recipe, because he didn't know what else to do with his hands all afternoon. The smell fills the kitchen, triggering memories that make David's face tighten. Thomas sees it and wishes he'd made something else. The corn needs to come off this week, Walter says, breaking the silence. Weather's turning. Rain by Wednesday? I'll call Johnson's crew in the morning, Thomas says. They're booked until next week, Walter replies. I already checked. David sets down his fork. I could help. The words fall like stones in still water. Thomas stares at his son, uncertain he heard correctly. You've been gone 20 years, Thomas says carefully. City life doesn't keep a man sharp for harvest work. I grew up doing it. David's voice is level, but there's an edge beneath. I spent every fall from age 12 to 25 in those fields. I remember how. It's harder than you remember. You'd hurt yourself. I'm 50, not dead. David's eyes flash. I'm offering to help. You can accept it or keep being stubborn. Walter catches Thomas's eye across the table. Thomas reads the message clearly. Take the help, take the olive branch, don't be a fool. All right, Thomas says finally. We'll start tomorrow afternoon, after the lawyer. David nods, returning to his food. The tension eases slightly. Thomas finds himself studying his son when he thinks David isn't looking, searching for familiar pieces in this stranger's face. You married? Thomas says, gesturing to David's ring. Your mother mentioned it once. Wouldn't tell me more. David touches the ring unconsciously. 15 years ago. Her name is Jennifer. She's a pediatric nurse. We met at a hospital fundraiser. Children. 2, Emma's 12. Michael's 9. David's voice softens when he speaks their names. They're good kids, smart, kind. Thomas's chest tightens. Grandchildren he's never met. A daughter-in-law he knows nothing about. A whole life that happened without him. You have pictures? David hesitates, then pulls out his phone. He scrolls through, his face showing the first genuine warmth since he arrived. He turns the screen to Thomas, a family photo, everyone smiling. The children have David's eyes. They're beautiful, Thomas says, his voice rough. Your mother would have loved to meet them. She did. David pulls the phone back. We visited her 3 times. Once when Emma was born, once when Michael was 4, and once 2 years ago. We drove out here, spent the day. You were at a cattle auction in Ohio. Convenient timing. The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Margaret never told him, never mentioned that David came back, that she'd met her grandchildren. She'd kept the secret, probably knowing Thomas would say something stupid that couldn't be taken back. She never said. I asked her not to. David's voice is hard again. I came for her, not for you. I wasn't ready to face you. Wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. But you're here now. Because she's dead. The words are brutal in their honesty. Because her will specified I had to come in person. Because even from the grave, she's trying to fix what's broken between us. Walter stands abruptly. I'm going to check on the barn cats, he announces, though everyone knows it's an excuse. He leaves, and the silence is heavier than before. Thomas and David sit across from each other, 2 men bound by blood and separated by years of hurt. I should have been there, Thomas says finally. When you got married, when your children were born, all of it. But you weren't. No, I wasn't. And whose fault is that? David leans forward. I left because you pushed me away, because nothing I did was ever good enough. But after I was gone, you could have reached out. You could have called. You did nothing. I did right. The words escape before Thomas can stop them. His hand goes to the envelope in his pocket. David's eyes follow the movement. What is that? What are you carrying? Thomas pulls out the envelope slowly. He sets it on the table between them, yellowed and worn. David stares at it. I wrote this 30 years ago, Thomas says. Month after you left. Spent 3 weeks writing and rewriting it, trying to find the right words to say I was sorry. To explain, To ask you to come home. But you never sent it. David's voice is flat. I was afraid. Of what? That I'd reject it. That I wouldn't forgive you? David reaches for the envelope, then stops, his hand hovering above it. Or were you afraid I would forgive you, and you'd have to actually change? The accusation cuts deep because it carries truth. Thomas was afraid of all those things and more. Afraid of vulnerability, of admitting weakness, of letting down the walls he'd spent a lifetime building. I don't know, Thomas admits. Maybe all of that. I convinced myself it was better to wait, to give you time. And then time kept passing, and it got harder and harder. The gap got wider, the silence got louder, and I told myself it was too late, that you'd moved on. That was convenient, David says bitterly. Easier than actually trying. Yes, it was easier. It was cowardly. But I carried this letter every day for 30 years, David. Every single day. That has to count for something. Does it? David picks up the envelope, turns it over in his hands. This is addressed to a college that closed 15 years ago. To a person who doesn't exist anymore. What good is a 30-year-old apology? Maybe none. Maybe it's too late for apologies. But you asked why I never reached out. That's why. Because I convinced myself this letter was reaching out, that carrying it meant something, that as long as I had it, I hadn't completely given up. David stares at the envelope for a long moment. Then he sets it back on the table and pushes it toward Thomas. I can't deal with this tonight. I can't deal with 30 years of should-haves and could-haves. Mom's funeral is still too fresh. This house, these fields, they're all still too raw. He stands, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm going to take a walk. Clear my head. Don't wait up. He leaves through the kitchen door, and Thomas watches him go, watches him walk toward the fields where they used to work side by side, where Thomas taught him to drive a tractor. David's silhouette grows smaller against the darkening sky, moving toward the creek that runs along the property's eastern edge. Walter returns from his fake errand, takes in the empty chair and Thomas's stricken face, and pours them both a glass of whiskey. That went better than I expected, Walter says, settling into David's vacant chair. He rejected the letter. Wouldn't even open it. He didn't reject it. He said he couldn't deal with it tonight. That's different. Walter sips his whiskey. Tom, that boy came back to a place he swore he'd never see again. Cut him some slack. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe you can't fix it. Maybe it's too broken. Walter meets Thomas's eyes. But maybe broken things don't need to be fixed. Maybe they just need to be acknowledged. Maybe you start by being honest about what happened, why he really left. The whole truth this time. Thomas knows what Walter means. The truth he's kept hidden for 30 years. The truth that even Margaret never fully knew. The real reason David left. The secret that sits at the heart of everything. He'll hate me more if he knows. Maybe, or maybe he'll finally understand. Walter finishes his whiskey and stands. I'm heading home. You going to be all right alone tonight? I've been alone for 3 months. One more night won't kill me. After Walter leaves, Thomas sits at the kitchen table, staring at the yellowed envelope. He could open it himself, read the words he wrote so long ago. But he can't bring himself to break the seal. Instead, he carries the envelope with him as he locks doors and turns off lights. He pauses at David's old room, sees the light off beneath the door. But when Thomas goes to his own room and looks out the window, he sees David still down by the creek, a dark figure against the starlit sky. Thomas remembers teaching David to cast a line, to read the water. He remembers the pride on David's face when he caught his first base, the trust in his eyes when he looked at Thomas like he hung the stars. He remembers when his son still loved him. At some point past midnight, Thomas hears the kitchen door open and close softly, hears David's footsteps on the stairs. The house sighs into silence. Tomorrow, Margaret's will is read. Tomorrow they harvest the corn together. Tomorrow, Thomas might find the courage to tell the truth. The law office of Patterson and Sons sits above the hardware store on Main Street, a walk-up with stairs that creak and a waiting room that smells of old paper and lemon furniture polish. Thomas and David sit in chairs across from each other, not speaking, both pretending to read magazines neither is actually looking at. Robert Patterson III, third generation to serve the town's legal needs, emerges from his office at precisely 10 o'clock. He's 60, bald as a riverstone, wearing a suit that's seen better days, but is still professionally pressed. He knew Margaret well, and his eyes show genuine sadness when he greets them. "Thomas, David, thank you for coming. Please come in." His office is exactly what you'd expect. Dark wood paneling, diplomas on the walls, a desk covered in neat stacks of paper. Everything speaks of continuity, of traditions maintained, of order in a chaotic world. Margaret's will sits on the desk in a blue folder, waiting to reveal her final wishes. Patterson settles into his chair and begins the formal reading, his voice taking on the measured cadence of legal language. Most of it is straightforward. Margaret's personal effects go to various relatives and friends. Her savings, modest but respectable, is split between charities she supported. The house and all its contents go to Thomas, as expected. The reading moves quickly through these items until Patterson reaches the portion about the farmland. "To my beloved son, David Thomas Whitmore," Patterson reads, "I leave 300 acres of Whitmore farmland, including all outbuildings, equipment and water rights, with the following conditions." David sits forward sharply. Thomas feels the bottom drop out of his stomach. They both stare at Patterson, who continues reading in his steady voice. "First, David must spend a minimum of 30 consecutive days on the property within 6 months of my death, working the land and making decisions about its future. Second, during this time, Thomas Whitmore will share fully in all decisions regarding the farm's operation and will provide guidance and knowledge accumulated over 50 years of stewardship. Third, at the end of 30 days, David will decide whether to keep the farm, sell it to his father for $1, or sell it on the open market with proceeds split equally between father and son." Patterson looks up from the document. There's a letter attached. Margaret wrote it specifically to be read after the will. "Would you like me to continue?" Thomas and David both nod, too shocked to speak. Patterson pulls out a handwritten letter, Margaret's familiar script filling 2 pages, and begins to read. "My dear Thomas and my darling David, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and you're both sitting in Robert's office probably looking like you've been hit with a 2x4. Good. You needed hitting. You've both been stubborn fools for 20 years, and I'm tired of watching it. So I'm doing what neither of you had the courage to do. I'm forcing you to face each other, to work together, to remember what you had before pride and hurt broke it apart." Patterson continues. "Thomas, you're going to teach our son everything you know about the land his great-great-grandfather claimed. You're going to share the knowledge you've hoarded like a miser hoards gold. You're going to be the father you should have been 30 years ago. David, you're going to listen. You're going to give your father a chance to make amends. You're going to remember that the man who hurt you also loved you more than his own life, even if he had a twisted way of showing it." The letter goes on. "And you're both going to stop carrying around your anger and your guilt like badges of honor. 30 days. That's all I'm asking. 30 days to see if what's broken can be mended, or at least understood. If at the end you both decide to go your separate ways, so be it. At least you'll have tried. At least you'll know I love you both. Always have. Always will. Even from wherever I am now. Margaret." Patterson finishes reading and sets the letter down gently. The office is silent, except for the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Thomas's eyes burn with unshed tears. David stares at his hands, emotions flickering across his face too fast to read. "I need some air," David says finally, standing abruptly. He walks out without looking at his father. Thomas finds David outside, sitting on the bench in front of the hardware store, staring at nothing. The morning is bright and cool, the kind of October day that makes everything seem sharper, more vivid. Thomas sits beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. "She always did know how to back us into a corner," David says finally. "She was good at that. 30 days. Working together, like the last 20 years never happened." David laughs, but there's no humor in it. "What was she thinking? That we needed pushing, that left to ourselves, we'd stay angry forever." Thomas pauses. "She wasn't wrong," David turns to look at him. I have a life, Dad, a job, a family. I can't just drop everything for a month to play farmer. The terms are clear. 30 days, or the farm goes to auction and the proceeds go to charity. She made sure neither of us could walk away without losing everything. Maybe that's what should happen. Maybe this place has caused enough pain. Thomas feels the words like a knife. 5 generations of Whitmores wiped out because he couldn't be the father his son needed. Is that what you want? To let it go? To let everything your great-great-grandfather built turn into subdivisions? I don't know what I want. David's voice cracks. I've spent 20 years building a life away from this place, away from these memories, and now Mum's dragging me back, forcing me to confront everything I've tried to forget. She's giving you a choice, giving us both a choice. We can do the 30 days, or we can walk away. But she's right about one thing. If we walk away now, we'll never know if things could have been different. David is quiet for a long moment, watching Main Street's modest traffic. A young mother pushes a stroller past. An old man walks his dog. Life continues, indifferent to their drama. I'll need to call Jennifer, David says finally. Explain. She's not going to be happy. The kids will miss me. Bring them here. The words are out before Thomas realizes he's going to say them. The house is big. Plenty of room. Let me meet my grandchildren. Let them see where their father grew up. David stares at him. You want me to bring my family here? After everything? I want a chance, Thomas says simply. A chance to show you I've changed. Or maybe that I can change. A chance to be part of your life, even if it's just for 30 days. A chance to not die alone, knowing I destroyed the most important relationship I ever had. The raw honesty seems to strike something in David. His shoulders drop slightly. I'll call her. See what she says. But I'm not promising anything beyond the 30 days. If at the end I decide to sell and walk away, you have to accept that. I will. I'll accept whatever you decide. They sit together on the bench, father and son, taking the first tentative steps towards something that might be reconciliation, or might be just another form of goodbye. The combine roars to life with a diesel rumble that Thomas feels in his bones. David stands beside the massive machine, looking up at it with a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. You remember how to operate one of these? Thomas shouts over the engine noise. In theory. David climbs up into the cab, his movements uncertain. It's been 25 years. Thomas climbs up beside him, the cab cramped with both their bodies. He guides David through the controls, pointing out what's changed, what's the same. His hand covers David's on the lever, and for a moment, they're touching, connected. You take the first pass, Thomas says. I'll follow in the grain cart. David nods. He engages the header, and the combine lurches forward. The corn begins feeding into the machine, stalks disappearing, grain flowing into the tank. Thomas watches from the grain cart, seeing his son's confidence return as muscle memory takes over. They work through the afternoon, falling into the rhythm that sustained farmers for generations. Cut, turn, empty, repeat. The sun tracks across the sky. The field slowly transforms from gold to stubble. During a break for water, they stand at the field's edge, looking at what they've accomplished. 2 acres down, dozens more to go. I'd forgotten how satisfying this is, David admits. Seeing tangible progress, knowing at the end of the day exactly what you've done. That's what I always loved about farming. Thomas wipes his forehead. We see results immediately. The field that was full in the morning is empty by evening. Concrete, real. I remember you saying something like that when I was a kid. They return to work, the combine roaring back to life. The afternoon stretches into evening, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts between them. Walter arrives as the sun begins to set, bringing sandwiches and coffee. They eat standing at the field's edge, 3 men covered in chaff and dust, surveying the day's work. Jennifer's coming, David announces. She'll drive up Friday with the kids. Stay through the weekend. See if this is something we can all handle. Thomas feels something warm bloom in his chest. Hope, fragile and frightening. I'll make up the rooms. Get the house ready. Should I cook, or would you rather go out? Cook if you're up for it. Let them see the full experience. Who you are. How you live. David finishes his sandwich. But fair warning, Emma's vegetarian and Michael has ADHD. He needs structure and patience. They're not farm kids. This will all be new to them. I'll manage. Or I'll try to manage. If I screw up, tell me. Oh, I will. David almost smiles. Count on it. They finish the harvest as darkness falls, the combine's lights cutting through the night. The field that was full at dawn stands empty under the stars. 300 acres more to go, but they've made a start. That night, Thomas can't sleep. He lies in bed, thinking about Jennifer and the grandchildren coming in 2 days. The house needs work. He needs to figure out meals and activities and how to talk to children he's never met. But beneath the anxiety lies something else, a knot of guilt and fear that's been growing since David arrived. The truth he's carried for 30 years, the real reason David left, the secret that even Margaret never fully understood. At 2 a.m, he gives up on sleep. He goes downstairs, makes tea and sits at the kitchen table with the yellowed envelope. For the first time in 30 years, he considers opening it, reading his own words, remembering the man he was when he wrote them. He's reaching for the envelope when he hears footsteps on the stairs. David appears in the kitchen doorway, also unable to sleep, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. Couldn't sleep either? David asks. Old man problems. Bladder wakes me up, brain won't let me go back to sleep. David pours himself water, leans against the counter. I keep thinking about what Mom wrote in her letter, about you having a twisted way of showing love. What did she mean by that? Thomas's hands tighten around his teacup. This is it. The moment he's dreaded and needed for 30 years. He can deflect, can lie, can keep the secret buried. Or he can tell the truth and risk losing David all over again. There's something I need to tell you, Thomas says slowly. Something I should have told you 30 years ago. Something that might help you understand why I was the way I was. David senses the gravity in Thomas's voice. He pulls out a chair and sits, his face guarded but attentive. Thomas takes a breath. Your grandfather, my father, he was a hard man. Harder than you ever knew. He believed in discipline, in toughness, in making sure his sons could survive anything. He thought love made men weak. I remember him being stern, but I was just a kid when he died. You saw the surface. You didn't see what he was like behind closed doors. Thomas's hands shake slightly. He never hit me. Never had to. He had other ways of teaching lessons. Cold silence that lasted weeks. Work assignments designed to break you. Criticism that cut deeper than any fist. David's expression shifts, understanding beginning to dawn. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying I learned how to be a father from a man who believed love was weakness, who thought praising your son would make him soft, who pushed and pushed and pushed, always demanding more, never satisfied. So you did the same to me. David's voice is flat, but underneath lies hurt and anger. You treated me the way he treated you. Not exactly. I tried to be different. I tried to show you I cared in small ways. But when it came to the important things, I fell back on what I knew. I pushed when I should have embraced. I criticized when I should have praised. Because nothing I did was ever good enough for him. And you never broke free of his voice in your head. No, I never did. Thomas meets his son's eyes. But that's not the whole truth. That's not why you left. David goes very still. What do you mean? Thomas closes his eyes. The moment he's dreaded for 30 years has arrived. He can turn back now, can retreat into comfortable lies. Or he can finally tell the truth. Your grandfather had a younger brother, Samuel. He was different from the rest of the family. Gentle, artistic, wanted to be a teacher instead of a farmer. My father despised him for it. Called him weak. Called him a disgrace to the family name. Thomas's voice drops to barely above a whisper. Samuel left the farm when he was 22. Went to the city, became a teacher like he wanted. Met someone, built a life that made him happy. My father never spoke to him again, forbade us from even mentioning his name. When Samuel died 15 years later, my father wouldn't let us go to the funeral. David's face has gone pale. He's beginning to understand where this is going. When you came to me with your ideas about sustainable farming, Thomas continues, about doing things differently, about breaking from tradition, all I could see was Samuel. All I could hear was my father's voice saying that any deviation from the path was betrayal, that new ideas were weakness, that anyone who wanted to change things was rejecting everything the family stood for. So you pushed me away. David's voice is barely audible. You made me feel like wanting to do things my own way, made me a disappointment. I was terrified. Thomas's voice breaks. Terrified that if I let you do things your way, you'd leave like Samuel left. That I'd lose you the way my father lost his brother. So I tried to control you, tried to force you into the mold I knew, thinking that was the only way to keep you here. But all I did was guarantee you'd leave. I created the exact outcome I was trying to prevent. The words hang in the air between them, 30 years of truth finally spoken. David stares at his father, his face working through a cascade of emotions. Anger, hurt, understanding, grief. You never told me any of this. David's hands clench into fists. You never explained. You just let me think I was the problem, that I wasn't good enough, that wanting to honor the land in my own way made me a failure in your eyes. I know. Thomas's eyes fill with tears. I was a coward. I chose repeating my father's mistakes over breaking free of them. I chose fear over trust, and I lost you because of it. David stands abruptly, his chair scraping hard against the floor. He paces to the window, his back to Thomas, his shoulders rigid with tension. The kitchen clock ticks loudly in the silence. Did Mom know? David asks finally. Some of it, not all. She knew about Samuel, but she never knew how deeply my father's voice still controlled me. How terrified I was of losing you. Thomas wipes his eyes. She tried to help me see it, tried to break through my fear. But I was too stubborn, too blind. By the time I realized what I'd done, you were gone. David turns slowly to face him. His face is wet with tears, his expression raw with 3 decades of pain, finally explained, but not erased. Do you have any idea what it was like? David's voice shakes. Loving you, looking up to you, wanting nothing more than to be like you, and feeling like everything about me disappointed you. Like the person I was, the ideas I had, the future I wanted, all of it was wrong, because it wasn't exactly what you wanted. I know, or I'm beginning to understand. And I'm sorrier than I can ever express. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too broken to recognize it. David crosses back to the table. He picks up the envelope, turns it over in his hands. Is this what's in here? This explanation? Some of it, not all. I understood my fear, but I didn't understand the deeper roots. Didn't connect it to my father until years later, after therapy your mother insisted I try. You went to therapy? For 5 years. Started 6 months after you left. Didn't help us, but it helped me understand myself. Understand why I couldn't be the father you needed. David stares at the envelope, then at his father, and something shifts in his expression. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I need time to process this, he says finally. I need to think, to feel, to figure out what this means. I understand. Take all the time you need. David walks toward the stairs, then pauses. Thank you for finally telling me, for finally being honest. It doesn't fix anything, but it's a start. The house has been transformed. Thomas spent 2 days cleaning, preparing rooms, and attempting to make the old farmhouse welcoming. He bought vegetarian food for Emma, researched ADHD management strategies for Michael, and tried to remember how to talk to children after decades of only speaking to adults. David's been different since the conversation in the kitchen. Not warmer exactly, but more thoughtful. They've continued working the harvest together, and in the quiet moments between machine noise, they've talked. Small pieces of honesty exchanged like currency. Stories about the past shared and examined from new angles. Walter visits daily, watching their progress with quiet approval. Margaret would be pleased, he told Thomas yesterday. Pleased and probably surprised. Now, Friday afternoon, Thomas stands on the porch watching the driveway for the 3rd time in an hour. His hands shake slightly. He's meeting his grandchildren for the first time. Meeting his daughter-in-law properly, not as a stranger, but as family. David stands beside him, also nervous. Jennifer's protective, he warns. She knows the whole story. Knows what you did, how you hurt me. She's coming because I asked her to, but she's not going to make it easy for you. I wouldn't expect her to. She loves you. She's protecting you. She's also curious, wants to see if you're really trying to change or if this is all an act. David glances at his father. I told her about our conversation. About Samuel. About your father. She says it explains things but doesn't excuse them. She's right. Understanding why I hurt you doesn't mean I didn't hurt you. A blue minivan appears at the end of the driveway. Thomas's heart begins to race. David straightens, a smile breaking across his face for the first time since he arrived. The father Thomas has seen all week, gives way to the husband, and Father David has become. The minivan parks, and 3 people emerge. Jennifer is petite, with auburn hair and intelligent eyes that immediately assess Thomas with professional scrutiny. Emma, 12, has David's serious expression and her mother's coloring. She looks at the farm with open skepticism. Michael, 9, bounces out of the van with characteristic energy, his eyes wide as he takes in the fields, the barn, the vastness of it all. "Dad!" Emma runs to David, and he catches her in a hug that speaks of deep connection. Michael follows, chattering about the drive, the farms they passed, the cows he saw. Jennifer approaches more slowly, her hand finding David's after he releases the children. David turns to Thomas, his arm around Jennifer's waist. "Jennifer, Emma, Michael, this is my father. Thomas Whitmore." The moment stretches. Thomas doesn't know what to say. He settles for simple truth. "Thank you for coming. It means more than I can express." Jennifer studies him for a long moment. "David asked us to come, so we came. But I'm here for him, not for you. If you hurt him again, we're gone. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear." "And fair." Thomas meets her eyes. "I don't deserve a chance, but I'm grateful for one anyway." Michael, unaware of the tension, runs up to Thomas. "Are you really my grandpa? Dad said you have tractors and corn and maybe chickens. Can I see the chickens? Do you have horses?" "I've never ridden a horse, but I think I'd be good at it. Mom says I have good balance except when I'm excited, then I fall down a lot. But I think horses are different than just walking, right?" The words tumble out in a rush, and Thomas finds himself smiling despite his nerves. "I do have chickens. No horses right now, but we used to. And yes, I'm your grandpa. Not sure I'm good at it yet, but I'm willing to learn if you're willing to teach me." Michael considers this seriously. "Okay, but I have rules. I need to know what's happening next. Mom says transitions are hard for me, and sometimes I get really loud, and I can't sit still very long. Is that okay?" "That's more than okay. We'll figure it out together." Emma hangs back, more cautious than her brother. She studies Thomas with David's analytical gaze. "Mom says you hurt Dad, that you weren't a good father. Why should we trust you now?" The question is direct and brutal in its honesty. Jennifer starts to intervene, but Thomas holds up his hand. "Your mom's right. I was a terrible father. I hurt your dad badly. As for why you should trust me, I can only tell you I'm trying to be better. Trying to earn a place in your lives even though I don't deserve it." Emma processes this, then nods slowly. "Okay, but I'm watching you. If you make Dad sad, I'll know." The afternoon is spent showing them the farm. Michael's energy is overwhelming at first, his questions constant and his attention jumping from one thing to another. But Thomas finds he doesn't mind. The boy's enthusiasm reminds him of David at that age, before Thomas crushed that spirit with criticism and impossible standards. Emma warms up slowly. She asks intelligent questions about the farm's operations, about sustainability practices, about water management. Thomas recognizes David's curiosity in her, his analytical mind, his desire to understand systems. When he mentions some of David's ideas from 30 years ago, ideas he rejected, Emma's eyes light up. "Dad told me about that. About wanting to do regenerative agriculture. He still talks about it sometimes, says maybe in another life he would have been a farmer." She looks at Thomas directly. "He says you told him those ideas were stupid." "I did. I was wrong. Your father was ahead of his time, and I was too stubborn and scared to see it." "Are you still stubborn and scared?" "Probably. But I'm working on it." Jennifer watches these interactions from a distance, her professional assessment never wavering. During a moment when the children are exploring the barn with David, she approaches Thomas at the fence line. "David told me about your father," she says without preamble. "About Samuel, about the patterns you inherited. I imagine you have thoughts about that. Professional ones. I'm a nurse, not a therapist. But yes, I have thoughts." She leans on the fence beside him. "Trauma gets passed down. Patterns of behavior, ways of relating, fears and anxieties. Understanding that is important, but understanding doesn't mean accepting. David deserved better than to be a repository for your inherited pain. He did. He deserved a father who could break free of the past. And now, do you love him the way he needs to be loved?" Thomas considers the question honestly. "I don't know. I'm learning who he is again, who he's become. The David I knew left 30 years ago. The man here now is someone I'm just beginning to meet. But I want to love him well. I want to be the grandfather to your children that I couldn't be as a father. It's a start," Jennifer admits. "Not forgiveness, not trust, but a start." That evening they have dinner together, the farmhouse alive with voices and laughter for the first time in decades. Thomas cooks his grandmother's pot roast recipe, modified for Emma's vegetarian needs. Michael talks non-stop, his stories jumping from topic to topic. Emma asks thoughtful questions about family history. Jennifer observes, still protective, but perhaps beginning to soften. David catches Thomas's eye across the table, and something passes between them. Not healing, not yet, but recognition, acknowledgement, the beginning of something that might someday be called forgiveness. After the children are in bed, the three adults sit on the porch. The night is cool and clear, stars blazing overhead in a way city lights never allow. Michael had been amazed by the stars, had never seen so many, had wanted to sleep outside until Jennifer explained about temperature and practicality. "He's a great kid," Thomas says. "They both are. You've done well, both of you. We've tried," Jennifer says. "Parenting isn't easy, especially when you're trying not to repeat the mistakes of your own childhood." The comment hangs in the air, pointed but not unkind. David shifts in his chair. "I've made mistakes with them too," David admits. "I've been too strict sometimes, too focused on achievement. I see my father in myself sometimes and it terrifies me." "But you correct yourself," Thomas says quietly. "You recognize it and change. That's the difference. I never did. I just kept repeating the same patterns, convinced I was right, never seeing the damage I was doing." They sit in silence for a while, the night wrapping around them. In the distance, a coyote calls. The corn rustles in a breeze. The farm breathes around them, alive and ancient. "The harvest is almost done," David says. "Another week, maybe. Then we'll need to make decisions about the 30 days, about the farm, about what comes next. Whatever you decide, I'll accept it," Thomas says. "If you want to keep the farm, I'll help however I can. If you want to sell it, I'll understand. If you want to walk away and never come back, I won't stop you. We'll see," David says. "We'll see how these 30 days end. But Thomas, for the first time in 20 years, I have hope. That counts for something. It counts for everything." The days blend into a rhythm. Thomas wakes early, makes coffee, and finds David already in the kitchen more often than not. They plan the day's work over breakfast, their conversations growing easier, less guarded. Michael bursts into the kitchen like a small tornado, full of energy and questions. Emma follows more quietly, always observing, always thinking. Jennifer works remotely from the dining room table, her laptop open, phone calls scheduled around farm activities. She watches Thomas with her children, and slowly, her protective shield begins to lower. Not gone, but less rigid. Thomas teaches Michael to collect eggs from the chickens. The boy is fearless, reaching into nesting boxes with complete confidence, delighted when a hen pecks gently at his fingers. "She's saying hello," Michael announces. Thomas doesn't correct him, just smiles and nods. Emma spends hours in the barn, which she's claimed as her research space. She's testing soil samples from different parts of the farm, comparing them to research papers she's found online. David helps her set up proper testing protocols, and Thomas watches father and daughter work together with something like envy and joy mixed together. One afternoon, while the children are occupied, David takes Thomas to the far field, the one that borders the creek. They stand looking at land that's been fallow for 3 years, too rocky and uneven for modern equipment. This could be something, David says. Not traditional crops, but maybe orchards. Nut trees, something sustainable that works with the terrain instead of against it. Your mother always wanted fruit trees, Thomas says quietly. Planted a few apple trees near the house years ago, but they never took. Wrong soil, I think. Different soil here. Better drainage. Emma's tests show it's actually ideal for certain species. David pulls out his phone, shows Thomas research he's been doing. We could plant in the spring. Take 5 years to see real production, but it's a long-term investment. Thomas hears the "we" in David's words and feels something shift in his chest. Not a promise, but a possibility. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things. David pockets his phone. 20 years ago, you told me my ideas were impractical. That sustainable farming was a fantasy. That the only way to survive was to do things the way they'd always been done. I was wrong. Yeah, you were. David's voice is matter-of-fact, not angry. But I was also young and idealistic. I thought I could change everything overnight. Didn't understand the economics, the realities of farming on this scale. We were both right and both wrong. That's more generous than I deserve. Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of being angry. David picks up a handful of soil, lets it sift through his fingers. Emma asked me last night if we're going to stay. She likes it here, likes the space, the quiet, the stars. Mikkel wants to raise chickens professionally, whatever that means to a 9-year-old mind. What did you tell her? That we're still figuring it out. That sometimes the best decisions take time. David looks at his father. Jennifer says the kids are happier here than they've been in months. She says the change of pace is good for them. Good for all of us. They walk back toward the house in companionable silence. Thomas sees Jennifer on the porch, watching them approach. She waves and Thomas waves back. Such a small gesture, but it feels significant. That evening, Walter joins them for dinner. He's brought his famous apple pie, and the children devour it with enthusiasm. Michael tells Walter elaborate stories about the chickens, giving each one a name and personality. Emma shows him her soil research, and Walter asks intelligent questions that make her beam with pride. After dinner, Walter pulls Thomas aside, while David helps Jennifer with dishes and the children play a board game in the living room. You look different, Walter observes. Lighter somehow. I feel different. Like I've been carrying a weight for so long, I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. Margaret would be happy. She always believed you two could find your way back to each other. We're not there yet. Still a long way to go. But you're walking in the right direction. That's what matters. Later, after everyone's asleep, Thomas sits alone on the porch. The swing creaks its familiar song. He doesn't have the letter in his pocket anymore. David has it tucked away somewhere, unread but acknowledged. Maybe it doesn't matter what the letter says. Maybe what matters is the conversation they're having now, every day, in small moments and careful words. The farm is quiet under the stars. In the distance, an owl calls. The night is cool and perfect, and Thomas Whitmore feels something he hasn't felt in 20 years. He feels like a father again. 23 days into the 30, something breaks. It starts with a simple disagreement about equipment. Thomas wants to sell the old combine, the one they've been using for the harvest. It's worth money as scrap, and they could use a contractor next year. David wants to keep it, restore it, teach the kids how machinery works. It's a waste of money to maintain, Thomas argues. They're standing in the barn, the combine looming behind them like a rusting monument. It's part of the farm's history, David counters. Emma's interested in mechanical engineering. Michael loves anything with an engine. It's a teaching tool. It's a liability. Thing breaks down every other day. Parts are impossible to find. We'd be throwing good money after bad. David's voice sharpens. I thought this was my decision now. My farm, according to Mom's will. The words hang between them, sharp and cutting. Thomas feels the old defensiveness rising, the instinct to push back, to assert control. He catches himself, takes a breath. You're right. It's your decision. I'm just offering advice based on 50 years of experience. Advice I didn't ask for. David, I'm trying to help. Are you? Or are you trying to control things, same as you always did? David's face flushes. Every decision I want to make, you have a reason why it won't work. Every idea I have, you point out the flaws. You say you've changed, but have you really? Thomas feels the accusation like a slap.
That's not fair.
I've been listening to you, supporting your plans for the orchards, the sustainable practices. I haven't fought you on anything. You haven't fought openly. But you make these little comments, these suggestions, these pieces of advice that are really just criticism dressed up nice. David's voice rises. It's the same pattern, Dad. You can't let go. You can't trust me to make my own decisions. I'm trying to save you from making expensive mistakes. And there it is. David laughs bitterly. You don't trust me. You still see me as that 25-year-old kid who didn't know anything. You don't see the man I've become, the life I've built, the success I've had. You just see someone who needs to be controlled and corrected. The argument draws an audience. Jennifer appears in the barn doorway, concern on her face. Emma and Michael hover behind her, sensing the tension. Walter's truck pulls into the driveway, his timing impeccable as always. Maybe we should take a break, Jennifer suggests carefully. Cool down. Talk about this later. There's nothing to talk about, David says. This was a mistake. Mom thought 30 days could fix 20 years of damage, but she was wrong. Some things are too broken. He walks out of the barn, past his family, toward the fields. Thomas stands frozen, watching him go, feeling everything they've built over the past 3 weeks crumbling. He doesn't mean it, Walter says, approaching Thomas. He's just frustrated. He's right. Thomas's voice is hollow. I haven't changed. Not really. I'm still trying to control everything. Still can't trust him to make his own choices. Emma steps forward, her young face serious. Grandpa, can I say something? Thomas nods, not trusting his voice. Dad gets like this sometimes. When he's stressed or scared, he pushes people away before they can leave him. Emma speaks with a wisdom beyond her years. Mom says it's because of what happened with you. He's always waiting for people he loves to reject him. The words hit Thomas like a hammer. He sees it clearly now, the pattern he created. David learned to leave first, to protect himself from abandonment by abandoning others. Another gift Thomas gave his son, another wound that kept on hurting. What do I do? Thomas asks this 12-year-old girl, desperate for guidance. Go after him, Emma says simply. Don't let him push you away. Show him you're not going to leave, even when he's angry, even when he's difficult. That's what Mom does. Thomas looks at Jennifer, who nods. She's right. David tests people, pushes them to see if they'll stay. He's been doing it to you for 3 weeks, little tests. This is the big one. Thomas walks toward the fields, following David's path. He finds his son at the creek, at the same spot where they fished when David was young. David sitting on the bank, throwing stones into the water with angry force. Thomas sits beside him, saying nothing. They sit in silence for long minutes, the only sound the splash of stones and the creek's gentle babble. I'm sorry, Thomas says finally. You're right. I was trying to control things. Old habits die hard. That's not good enough, David says, but his voice has lost its sharp edge. I know, but it's the truth. I'm trying, David. I'm failing, but I'm trying. David throws another stone, watches it skip across the water. Do you know why I really left? The real reason, under all the arguments about farming practices. Tell me. Because I was suffocating. David's voice cracks. Every day I woke up trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to fit into this mold you had for me. The perfect son, the heir to 5 generations. And no matter what I did, I could feel your disappointment. It was like breathing air that was too thin. I couldn't get enough oxygen to survive. Thomas listens, forcing himself not to interrupt, not to defend, not to explain, just to hear. When I left, I could finally breathe, David continues. I built a life where I didn't have to prove anything, where Jennifer loved me for who I was, not who I should be, where I could parent Emma and Michael without your voice in my head telling me I was doing it wrong. He turns to look at Thomas. And then Mom died, and I had to come back, and I was terrified I'd start suffocating again. Are you suffocating? David considers the question. Sometimes, when you make those comments, when you question my decisions, I feel it starting again, that tightness in my chest. That voice saying, I'm not good enough. I don't want you to feel that way. But you keep doing things that make me feel it. David picks up another stone, but doesn't throw it. I know you're trying. I see the effort, but trying isn't the same as succeeding. And I don't know if I can spend the rest of my life wondering when you're going to slip back into old patterns. The words are painful, but fair. Thomas sits with them, feeling their weight. Your daughter is very wise, Thomas says finally. She told me you push people away to protect yourself, that you test them to see if they'll stay. She said that? David sounds surprised. She did. And she's right, isn't she? You're testing me, waiting for me to fail. And I keep failing. Not always. Not every time. David's voice softens slightly. You've been good with the kids, patient with Michael's energy, encouraging with Emma's curiosity. You listen to Jennifer. You've shown more growth in 3 weeks than I saw in 25 years. But it's not enough. I don't know if anything will ever be enough. David finally throws the stone, watches it sink. How do you forgive someone for stealing your childhood? For making you believe love was conditional? For teaching you that who you are is never sufficient? The question hangs between them, unanswerable and necessary. You don't, Thomas says quietly. You can't forgive that because it's unforgivable. But maybe you can accept it. Accept that I was broken, that I broke you, and that we're both trying to heal from wounds that go back generations. That's not enough for a relationship. No, it's not. But maybe it's enough for a beginning. Thomas turns to face his son. See you to saudata, skidit. I can't undo the past. I can't give you back the father you deserved. But I can offer you the father I'm becoming. Imperfect, still learning, still failing sometimes. But present, trying, honest about my failures. David is quiet for a long time. The creek flows past them, indifferent to human drama, ancient and constant. The 30 days are almost up, David says. I need to make a decision about the farm, about whether we stay or go. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to stay, wants to give Emma and Michael roots, give them this legacy. Part of me wants to run like I did 20 years ago. Take my family and go back to our safe life, where I don't have to face you every day. Face my own fears every day. What does Jennifer want? She wants whatever makes our family healthy and whole. She says the kids are thriving here, but she's worried about me. Worried about us? David gestures between himself and Thomas. She says if we stay, we need clear boundaries, clear expectations. Family therapy, probably. Real work, not just good intentions. I'll do whatever it takes. You say that now. But what about in 6 months, when the novelty wears off? When I make decisions you disagree with? When I parent my children differently than you think I should? Will you still be willing to do the work? Thomas wants to make promises. Wants to guarantee he'll never fail again. But he's learned enough to know such promises are lies. I don't know, he admits. I hope so, I believe so. But I've been wrong about myself before. All I can promise is that I'll keep trying. That I won't stop working on myself. That I won't run away when things get hard. David stands, brushes off his jeans. I need to think. Need to talk to Jennifer. We have a week left of the 30 days. I'll give you my answer then. He walks back toward the house, leaving Thomas by the creek. The final week passes slowly. Thomas gives David space, fighting every instinct to push, to ask, to try to influence the decision. They work together on the remaining harvest, their conversations careful and surface level. The easy rapport they'd been building feels fragile now, like glass that might shatter with one wrong word. Jennifer takes the children into town one afternoon, giving the men time alone. Thomas and David work on repairing a section of fence that's been neglected for years. The work is physical and familiar, requiring coordination but little conversation. Emma wants to come back in the summer, David says as they stretch new wire between posts. Whether we stay or not, she wants to continue her soil research. She's welcome anytime, always. Michael's been sleeping better here than he has in years. Fewer meltdowns, more regulated. David secures the wire, tests its tension. Jennifer thinks the structure helps. The predictable rhythms of farm life. Thomas hears what David isn't saying, the reasons to stay hiding beneath observations about the children. He doesn't comment, just nods and continues working. That evening, Walter joins them for what might be their last dinner together. He brings wine, good wine, the kind he saves for significant occasions. They eat on the porch, watching the sun set over fields that are nearly all harvested now. The work of 30 days nearly complete. Whatever you decide, Walter tells David, you've given an old man a gift these past weeks. Watching you and your father work together, seeing this house full of life again. Margaret would have been so proud, would she?
David's voice is quiet.
Or would she be disappointed that we're still struggling? That 30 days wasn't enough. She'd be proud that you tried. Both of you. Walter refills his wineglass. Margaret understood that healing takes longer than fixing, that some wounds never fully close, they just stop bleeding as much. After dinner, after Walter leaves and Jennifer takes the exhausted children to bed, David asks Thomas to take one more walk. They head to the fields, to the far corner where David wants to plant the orchards, where the future might take root, if there is a future. The moon is full, bright enough to see by. They stand looking at empty land, full of possibility. I found the letter, David says. The one you carried all those years. It fell out of my jacket pocket yesterday. Thomas's heart stutters. Did you read it? I did. David's face is unreadable in the moonlight. You want to know what I thought? If you want to tell me. It was honest, raw, more vulnerable than I've ever seen you be. David pauses. But it was also incomplete. You apologized for pushing me away, but you didn't explain why. You asked me to come home, but you didn't promise things would be different. It was the apology of a man who knew he was wrong, but didn't understand how to be right. That's fair. But you understand now, don't you? After therapy, after losing Mom, after these 30 days. You understand what you did and why you did it. I'm beginning to. David turns to face him. That letter was 30 years old. If you wrote it today, what would you say? The question catches Thomas off guard. He considers it carefully, knowing this might be his only chance to say what matters. I'd say I'm sorry isn't enough. That I stole something from you, I can never return. That I taught you to doubt yourself when I should have taught you to trust your instincts. Thomas's voice roughens. I'd say you were always enough. More than enough. That every idea you had, every dream you dreamed was valuable and worthy and right. That I was terrified of losing you, and that fear made me hold so tight I crushed what I was trying to protect. He continues, the words flowing now. I'd tell you about Samuel, about my father, about patterns that go back generations. Not as an excuse, but as an explanation. I'd tell you that breaking free of those patterns is the hardest work I've ever done, and that I'll probably never fully succeed. But I'd promise to keep trying, and I'd tell you that you have a right to be angry, to be hurt, to decide that what I did is unforgivable, that I'll respect whatever choice you make, that I'll love you whether you stay or go, whether you forgive me or not, that my love isn't conditional anymore if it ever really was. Thomas's eyes are wet. And I'd tell you that these 30 days have been the best days I've had in 20 years. That meeting your children, seeing the man you've become, watching you parent with patience and wisdom I never had. It's been an honor I don't deserve. David is silent, his face turned toward the empty field. That's what I needed to hear, David says finally. Not 30 years ago, now, when you've done the work to understand yourself, when you can own what you did without making excuses. He turns to face Thomas. Jennifer and I talked for hours last night about what staying would mean, what leaving would mean. What's best for the kids, for us, for you. Thomas's heart pounds. This is it, the moment everything has been building toward. We're staying, David says. Not forever, not necessarily, but for a year, maybe longer. We're going to try. The words don't register at first. Thomas stares at his son, certain he misheard. We'll rent out the city house, David continues. Jennifer can work remotely. The kids can do school here. I'll take a leave from my job, see if this is really what I want. What we want as a family, he pauses. But there are conditions. Anything. We need boundaries. Clear ones. You don't get to make decisions about the farm without consulting me. You don't get to criticize how Jennifer and I parent. You don't get to undermine my authority with the kids. David's voice is firm. And we do family therapy, all of us. Professional help to navigate this. I agree to all of it. And if it's not working, if we're falling back into old patterns, we reserve the right to leave. To sell the farm, take our share and go. No guilt trips, no drama. I understand. David studies his father's face, searching for truth or deception. Why do you think this will work? What's different now? Everything, nothing. Thomas struggles to articulate what he feels. I'm different because I've lost everything and learned what matters. You're different because you're not a scared 25-year-old anymore. We're both different because Margaret forced us to face each other instead of running. That's not enough. No, it's not. But we also have Emma and Michael. They're watching us, learning from us. I don't want to teach them that broken relationships can't heal. I don't want them to inherit our pain. David nods slowly. That's part of why I'm staying. I want them to see that hard things are worth doing. That family is worth fighting for. That sometimes love means staying when leaving would be easier. They stand together in the moonlit field, two men who've spent decades apart and 30 days learning to be father and son again. It's not healed. It's not perfect, but it's real. There's one more thing, David says. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out the yellowed envelope. I think you should read this. Your letter from 30 years ago. Why? Because you need to see how far you've come. You need to see the man you were and recognize you're not him anymore. David presses the envelope into Thomas's hands. Read it, then burn it. Let it go. Thomas takes the envelope, feels its familiar weight one last time. Will you stay while I read it? If you want me to. They sit on the ground, on the land that's been in their family for 5 generations and might sustain a 6th and 7th. Thomas opens the envelope carefully, pulls out the letter he wrote 3 decades ago. His younger self's handwriting looks back at him, cramped and desperate. He reads words of apology that don't quite understand what they're apologizing for. Promises to do better that don't acknowledge what better means. Pleas for David to come home that don't address why home wasn't safe. It's the letter of a man in pain, but not a man who understands his pain. It's honest but incomplete, vulnerable but still defensive. It's everything David said it was. Thomas finishes reading and carefully folds the letter back into the envelope. You're right. This isn't who I am anymore. So let it go. They walk back to the house together. Thomas retrieves matches from the kitchen. Outside, in the fire pit where they've roasted marshmallows with the kids, Thomas sets the letter ablaze. The paper catches quickly, curling and blackening. 30 years of carrying gone in moments. David stands beside him watching the fire. You know what's strange? I thought I'd feel something when you finally let it go. Satisfaction, maybe. Or closure. But I just feel tired. Healing is exhausting. Yeah, it really is. The fire dies down to embers. They stand together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes not from having nothing to say, but from having said enough. Inside the house, through the window, they can see Jennifer putting the children to bed. Emma's reading a book. Michael's bouncing on the mattress, despite his mother's patient corrections. It's normal. It's family. It's home. Thank you, Thomas says quietly, for giving me this chance, for bringing your family here, for staying. Thank you for finally being the father I needed, David's voice catches. Better late than never. They return to the house together, to the family waiting inside, to the future they're building one difficult day at a time. Spring arrives with a burst of green that transforms the farm. 6 months have passed since David's decision to stay. 6 months of hard work and harder conversations, of therapy sessions and boundary negotiations, of failures and forgiveness. The orchard is going in today. 20 apple trees, 15 pear, a dozen cherry. David planned the layout with Emma, who calculated optimal spacing and sun exposure. Michael painted signs for each tree variety. His 9-year-old handwriting cheerful and crooked, Thomas stands at the edge of the field, watching his son and grandchildren work. David operates the auger, drilling holes. Emma follows behind with saplings, checking each placement against her carefully drawn map. Michael carries buckets of water, sloshing more on himself than into the holes. but no one corrects him. Jennifer takes photos, documenting the day their family put down permanent roots. Walter arrives with lunch, sandwiches and lemonade. They take a break under the old oak tree that stood at the field's edge for 100 years. 5 generations of Whitmores, and not one of them thought to plant an orchard, Walter observes. I had to wait for the 6th to have that kind of vision. And the 7th, Emma adds, pointing to Michael. He's going to manage the beehives when the trees start producing. For pollination, assuming he can sit still long enough, Jennifer says fondly, watching her son chase a butterfly across the field. David catches Thomas's eye and they share a smile. Not perfect, not without complicated history, but real and warm and enough. The afternoon passes in good work and better company. When the last tree is planted, Emma insists they have a ceremony. They stand in a circle around the youngest apple tree, and she reads from notes she's prepared. These trees represent our family's future, Emma says seriously. They'll take years to grow, just like relationships take years to heal. They'll need care and attention and patience. But someday, they'll provide fruit for generations we haven't even met yet. She looks at Thomas. Grandpa, do you want to say something? Thomas wasn't prepared for this. He looks at the faces surrounding him. His son, who stayed when leaving would have been easier. His daughter-in-law, who gave him a chance he didn't deserve. His grandchildren, who teach him daily what unconditional love looks like. Walter, who stood by him through everything. Your great-great-great-grandfather planted corn on this land in 1847, Thomas begins. He built a legacy of survival, of endurance, of doing what was necessary to make it through hard times. That legacy sustained 5 generations, but it also carried pain and patterns that needed breaking. He looks at David. Your father is planting a different kind of legacy, one that honors tradition but isn't bound by it, one that values sustainability over short-term gain, one that makes room for new ideas and new ways of being. And you too, Thomas continues, addressing Emma and Michael, you're the ones who'll carry it forward. You'll make your own choices, plant your own trees, build your own lives, but you'll do it knowing you come from people who love this land and each other, even when that love was complicated and imperfect. Michael tugs on Thomas's sleeve. Grandpa, can I water the trees again? The moment of ceremony breaks into laughter. Michael runs for the hose. Emma follows, insisting on proper watering techniques. Jennifer and David walk back toward the house, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. Walter claps Thomas on the back. You did good, Tom. Better than good. You did the hardest thing any man can do. You changed. I'm still changing, still learning, still failing sometimes. That's what makes it real. Walter heads toward his truck. Margaret would be proud. I know I am. Thomas stands alone in the orchard, surrounded by young trees that will outlive him. The evening sun paints everything golden. From the house he hears laughter and the sounds of dinner preparation. His family. His home. He thinks about the letter he carried for 30 years, now just ash and memory. He thinks about the man he was and the man he's becoming. He thinks about his father and Samuel and patterns broken and new legacies planted. The porch. Swing creaks in the distance, its chains singing the same song they've sung for 40 years. Thomas walks toward it, toward the house full of voices and life, toward the family he nearly lost and somehow found again. He's 73 years old. His knees ache. His back protests the day's work. But his heart, for the first time in decades, feels light. Tomorrow, they'll water the trees again. Tomorrow, David will start preparing fields for summer planting. Tomorrow, Emma will collect more soil samples, and Michael will check on his chickens. Tomorrow, the work continues. But tonight, Thomas. Whitmore sits on his porch with 3 generations of family around him, watching the sun set over land that's been loved and worked and fought for. The fields whisper their approval, the house settles with satisfaction, and somewhere Thomas is certain Margaret smiles. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole, together, home.